All right, last time we had our introduction to CSS, which is the language we use to control the appearance of our web page. The content of the web page is contained within the HTML. In other words, all the articles, the text, the images, the links, the content of the web page is in HTML. But the way it looks and the way that it's laid out on the screen, all those are controlled by CSS. And those things work together to make a complete experience of a website. The third element that we're going to throw in at the very end of the semester is JavaScript. And that works with the other two elements to give a complete web page experience. So I took the example from last time and build upon it, and I'll look at that today. I also want to take the time to review HTML. One of the common problems I see people have is they have tags in the wrong place. So they might have the right tags, but they're not positioned correctly. So I do want to take a minute to go over the positioning of tags. So let's open the example that we've been done. I have two versions of it here. Let's open up this page. And I'll open it up within Visual Studio Code. I'll also open it up in the web browser. All right. And I also have the C# tutorial page. If you notice, they have the same look to them. All right, that's not by coincidence. It's a good thing for your website to have consistent styling. If blue underlined text is a link on one page, it should be links on all your pages, and so on. So let's first look at the HTML of this page and review that. All right. First of all, we have our doc type at the very top, and we then have our HTML tag. The HTML tag goes around everything. So the and HTML tag is way down at the bottom of the page. Right? So that wraps around everything because everything is the HTML document. Now, the head is one of two sections directly underneath the HTML tag. So head is underneath the HTML tag and body is. Everything else is nested within one of those two tags. The head, we started out with just the title in it. And we're adding today this link tag that we're going to look at in a couple minutes. The body contains everything else, right? Header tag, which specifies sort of the banner on the top of the page, this code here, is actually part of the body, not part of the head. That's something that I recognize that that's a little confusing, but just remember that the header is part of the body. And likewise, the nav, the H1s, all of the stuff other than title. And now we have this link to an external file. And all of that is in the head. Everything else is within the body. Remember again that tags should be properly nested. And what that means is if a tag starts inside of a tag, or if code starts within a tag, it should end within it. So for example, this H1 is in the article tag. So the H1 starts in the article tag and ends in the article tag. Likewise the H2, likewise the paragraph. Paragraph's way over there. The other thing is you can structure the white space any way that you want to. So if it makes it easier to read, to space it out like this, by all means do that. Notice this will not have any effect on the way that the page is laid out within the browser. So I can change that, save it, and redisplay it. And there's no difference at all. You can't see any difference. Let's see, anything else? This. Yeah, just remember where tags start and where tags end. That seems to be an issue for some people. And again, head and body, these things are in the head, everything else is within the body. Okay, so we have what's called an external style sheet in this example. The code that contains a style is in a file called site.css. And it's in the same directory as the web page. So all we have to do is say site.css. Later on, we'll talk about what if it's in a different folder. But right now, it's in the same folder as everything else. So all we have to do is say site.css. So I'm going to open that up as well. And we're going to look at it. Now, we link the web page together with the CSS file by an instruction that looks like this. Link type equals text / CSS, rel equals style sheet, href equals, and the name of the file. And if it's in the same folder, then we don't have to put any directories or anything in front of it. We just put the file name. Now, the advantage of putting it in a separate file is we can apply it to different pages. In other words, last week we looked at having the code directly in the HTML file within a style tag. Problem with that is, what if we have a bunch of pages on our site? Right? How do you handle that? Well, you could copy and paste, but there's always a chance that you're going to change something on one page and not change it on another page. So you're going to end up with an inconsistency. In addition, the amount of effort to be done. You know, would you rather make a change one place or make a change 50 places? Well, obviously, it's easier and more efficient to make the change only in one place. So both our pages in this little mini website point to the same CSS file. So both of them have the same link to site.css. Now, in this case, we have a series of style rules. And remember the way that these style rules are defined. This isn't too much different than what we went over last time, but there's a couple of twists that we did not encounter last time. The way the style rule works is we have what's called a selector. Selector is outside of the braces. Put some more space there if I want to make it more obvious. Selector defines what gets this style rule. And the most simple selector is just an HTML tag. So we can say that body here means that everything within the body of this web page gets this style. H1s get this style. Paragraphs get this style. navigation gets this style. Now you might wonder, what if we don't define a tag? For example, right here, we have an H2 tag. It says Computer Information System Programs. We haven't defined any style for it. All right. Well, in that case, the rules cascade down. That's one of the things about a cascading style sheet is if we don't define something for an H2, then it just gets what's in the body. So let's see here. It's the color of the body. And so that's why that text is that color. Or like we don't have anything for LIs. So LI gets container. The LI's in the nav, so it gets the style rule defined on the nav. All these are selectors, and these are the most common selectors. Or this is one of the most common selectors is use the the specific HTML tag. So body, H1, paragraph. If I wanted H2s to look a little different than H1s, could copy this rule. Could maybe make it H2 and maybe make this 2EM. Maybe make the color, and I'm just going to go for a lot of contrast here, so I'm going to make the color red, suggesting that's a good thing. And the background I could make white if I wanted. If we do that, this is the page that we get. Okay, so make sure you understand that. Make sure you understand the idea of a selector that says what gets this rule. Then we have the rules itself. And the rules are pairs of attribute name, colon, and a value. So that first one's a little bit complicated, so we won't look at that one right off. But like, for example, here, background is the background of this element, making it white. So sure enough, the H2, background of the H2 is white. Color is red. Color means the color of the text. So the color of the text is red. And the font size is 2EM, which means emphasize 2 times or twice as big as normal. So if you notice, that's bigger than the text of the link or the text of the paragraph. We talked last time how you can refer to colors several different ways. One way that you can do it is you can refer to colors by their color name. So in this case, white, red. And we looked at a resource of all the different HTML color names, and you can use any of these. And here's a list of them. Find any number of sites that have . list of color names you can use. We talked about also using this hex code. And I'm getting this little bit of help because I'm using the editor Visual Studio Code. If I had opened this up in Notepad, I wouldn't get that help. So that's a nice feature of the text editor Visual Studio Code. It's one of the reasons that I use it. When we look at colors, the first two letters represent how much red. And the digits are hexadecimal, which means that there are 16 options, 16 digits that we use. The digits go from 0 through F. So AA is a pretty high number. All right. So there's a pretty good amount of red in here. There is a little less green and still a little less blue in there. And that, when blended together, gives us this color. Any number of ways that we can get this. We can use a color generator. That will allow us to pick a color that we like and see the hex code for it. It shows the hex code for it. Yeah, right here. This is # FF0066. The other thing that we can do is we can look for an HTML theme generator. That's not what I want. Color scheme generator. Let's try that. We can use that to pick a set of colors to use on this. So this shows us one thing that we could use that are all different shades of brownish and green. And it gives us the color name there. That's a pro feature. Something that is completely free. This one gives us a little color wheel. And we can pick on the color wheel the basic color that we want. Let's say we want yellow. And we can ask for yellow as monochromatic. That means everything is going to be a shade of yellow. It's called adjacent colors. So all these are yellow and close to yellow on the color wheel. So we get some to the orange section, some into the green section. We can ask for these triad colors that are sort of like an equilateral, no, not an equilateral triangle, an isosceles triangle on the color wheel. Tetrad, which is 4 colors. Finally, freestyle, where you can make it anything you want. When you find something you like, I kind of like that one. You can go and click on tables and you can see the colors you have in there. You can see those codes over. Makes a little CSS cascading style sheet page for you, or a segment of a cascading style sheet page for you. It's a good way to guarantee that your colors go well together. You know, some people have a gift for that, for matching colors and coming up with good color schemes. But if you don't, it shouldn't stop you from being able to generate appealing looking websites, because you can always use a color generator. You know, I get people all the time say something to the effect of, you know, I'm not very artistic, you know, developing web pages and all that. Well, I can appreciate that. Different people have different strengths and weaknesses, but there are tools to compensate for that. And the color generator is one of those. Plus, some of the basics of design are not terribly artistic, but more are logical and adding to the readability of the page. All right. If you notice, the background has an image. And that's accomplished this way. I go background and I give it a color, I give it an image, and I specify no repeat. So color will be used if that image is not found. Like, let's say if I spelled computer wrong. I can't find it, well, it uses the color. If the image can be found, it will take the page found in this file. Again, notice no directories. That means that is in the same directory. That's the easiest for you to do. Put all your files in the same directory and just refer to them by name. What I don't want to see is something like C user Mike /lab5/ whatever, because that won't work when it gets downloaded to my machine, right? Because I don't have those directories. So keep everything in the same directory and just use the name of the file. And that, sure enough, if we look, is in this directory. This image here, which is kind of big, has a transparent background. And it will appear underneath text that's written. Now, one thing you have to be careful for when you use background images is that your text doesn't conflict with, the color of your text doesn't conflict with the colors of the image to make it hard to read. So for example, in this case, if I take out all of these style rules, one danger that you run into is, you notice some of this text gets a little hard to read when it goes up against the dark border. This word is hard to read, this word, because it kind of, the background color of the image kind of interferes with being able to see it. This actually isn't that bad. There are other cases where you'll have more difficulty with being able to read it. So one thing you can do when you use a background image is make sure that all the other elements have backgrounds too. And you can make them with a certain transparency. H1 and H2 don't have transparency associated with them. So the H1s and H2s, we can't see any of the image behind it. All it has is the background and the text color and the font size. These have a different transparency associated with it. So like if you notice a paragraph, you can see through and you can see the image peeking underneath it. Likewise, with the nav, you can see the image peeking underneath it. And that's done with the opacity. There's a couple of ways you can express opacity. One of them is by doing this, saying opacity is 0.7. That means it's close to, it's most of the way to solid. One would be completely solid. If I said opacity of 1, the nav, I changed, not the paragraph. Notice now we don't see the image at all behind the nav. We make it a lower number, it is closer to invisible. So if we made this 0.2, for example, barely see that underneath it. Barely see the background image underneath the text here. Now there's another way to express colors, and that's with this RGB function. This RGB function, or in particular this RGBA function, uses numbers to specify how much red, green, and blue. And the numbers range from 0 to 255. So we can tell this is white because we have the red turned up all the way, the green turned up all the way, and the blue turned up all the way. That makes white light. And the fourth number here is A, and that is also the opacity. Get what the A stands for. We'll go real quick. RPGAR. Alpha. I still got it wrong. It's the alpha. Alpha is another name for opacity. So I can go and identify these numbers here and get the color with the opacity. If I want to make it green, I could do this: no red, no blue, but the alpha at 0.5. And if you look a little bit, you can see that it's peeking through, but again, it's relatively solid. We made the alpha of 0. It means it's completely see-through. We don't see it at all here. All right, that's this example. The things new about this example were the background image and the opacity that we added on. The rest of stuff we covered last time. Now, if we look at this, it says no repeat. That's the other thing on this page. It's going to display the image only one time if we say no repeat. If we don't specify no repeat, it will tile it, which will mean it will display it over and over. So let's get rid of no repeat. And notice it tiles it. It puts them side by side and on top of each other going down. So I didn't want that to happen. I only wanted one copy of the image. So therefore I said no repeat. This, by the way, is a great way to learn any programming language. Is take a program that you have as an example that's already working and play around with things. What if I make this number a higher number? What if I make it a lower number? Play around with the opacity. What happens if I get rid of no repeat? What happens if I get rid of the background color? What happens if the image can't be found? Play around with things and then you see the effect, and that's a good way to learn how some code works. All right. Let's look at example number 2. And as I mentioned before, both this and the tutorial page look the same. Same look, because they're both sharing the same CSS file. And that's a good thing. We want things to be consistent on our website. So therefore, you might only have one CSS for your entire website. It's possible to have more than that. We'll talk a little bit more about that later on, but you could get away, depending on the size of the site, of only having one style sheet for your entire site. Now, version 2 takes the identical HTML and uses different CSS for it. So this is what this one looks like. Let's look at the code for this one. Start with the HTML. CSS. All right. This has asterisk margin 0. All right. Asterisk margin 0 means that there's going to be no space between the things on our page. We have a bunch of things on our page, right? We have headers, halves, wells, li. How much space is going to be between them? We said for every tag, there's no space between it and its nearest tag. So what happens if I get rid of this? Well, cut that. Save it. Notice there's a space at the very top of the page. Background, URL of tile PNG. All right. Notice I don't say no repeat, so that tile is repeated over and over again. So the individual tile looks like this. Well, it's just like, tiles that you put on your wall or on your floor or whatever. The pattern is such that when it matches up, it looks like it makes a continuous pattern. So you can look for CSS tile images. You can see images that fit this, this pattern. Now, the one thing that's different between this and others is specify the font family. Notice that the other examples that we had, in fact, probably all the examples that we looked at this semester were using Times New Roman, just a very basic font for this. However, we can change the font, and we can change the font through CSS. In fact, we can change virtually everything about the appearance of the page through CSS. In this case, the font family is on the body tag. So that means that everything within the body, in other words, everything on the whole page, gets this font family. Now notice that there are 3 font families mentioned: Broadway, ABC, sans serif. We might wonder why there are 3 fonts named. The reason for that is because not all machines have all fonts installed. There are certain fonts that come with a Mac that don't come with Windows, and vice versa. So you give a list of fonts, hoping that they will have at least one of the fonts on the list. Your last font is typically either serif or sans serif, and every browser should have a default serif and sans serif font. So if nothing else, this font will apply. What do I mean by serif and sans serif? Serifs are the little things on the end of letters. Big letter here. Use Times New Roman, which is a serif font. So if I type a T in Times New Roman, notice that at the bottom there's like a little thingy here. Thing is called a serif. So serif fonts have these little thingies on the end of a letter. Another font, serif font. There's another serif font, Garamond. It has the little dealies on the end of the letter too. They look a little different, but that's the difference of a font. Now, sans serif, sans simply means without. So sans serif font doesn't have those things. For example, Arial. Notice that the T is very plain, right? Now, different fonts, just like different colors, evoke different moods. Some fonts are more formal looking. Some fonts are more modern looking. Some fonts are more casual looking. So choosing a font is much like choosing the colors. You want to fit sort of your message and what the page is attempting to express, right? So in this case, I picked Broadway. ABC and sans serif. Broadway itself is a sans serif font, I believe. It is. I don't particularly like this font. I picked it just because it's very visible that this is a different font than the default. If we were to compare the fonts of different sites, let's look at the Wall Street Journal's font. They follow a formula that is pretty common. Serif for the headings, sans serif for the articles. Notice the headlines are in a serif font and the articles are in a sans serif font. If we look at Apple's site, they have a very specific font that they use that sort of brands them. That they use for everything. I would describe this font as clean, modern, sleek. Where I would describe the Wall Street Journals as formal, right? It's a respected newspaper. They're not going to have any silly kind of font. Whereas Apple doesn't want to look like an old, dusty institution. They want to still look modern. So that's the one thing that's different about this example is we were able to set the font. The other thing that we have is the way this is centered. And this is pretty common layout, basic layout for a site. A single column that may be centered on the page. And if we look, we do this for all the things, header, the nav, the article, and the footer. So if we understand one, we understand all of them. The background we set to white. That way we're putting the text against a clean white background, even though we have a background image. The width is 600 pixels. The margin is 0 pixels auto, and padding is 14 pixels. Padding is space between the edge of the thing and where the text starts. So this would be 14 pixels. If I make this a bigger number, I just did that on the header. So the header is a little bit extra space. Padding and margin can actually have 4 values, right? Because there's 4 directions of something on the page. There's a top margin, there's a right margin, there's a bottom margin, and there's a left margin. So I could specify a different margin for each one. Likewise with padding. There's a padding to the top, padding to the right, padding to the bottom, padding to the left. So I could specify 4. If I specify 2, then they repeat. So 0px is the top margin. Auto is the right margin. 0pxn is the bottom margin. Auto is the left margin. Auto simply means that it will automatically set the margin to center it. So that's what centers these things on the page. Margin of 0 pixels and auto. And I can specify the width. And the width is the width of the content plus any padding or margin or other stuff that exists on the page. So if you notice, we have 2 versions of the same HTML. They look very different. But the HTML code is identical. If we were to look at the HTML code, this code is the same as this code. Yet they look really different. There's a site that sort of showcases this. It's called CSS Zen Garden. And this is a fun site to take a look at because what they have done is they've taken a basic web page, they designed it, they have designers design it different ways. The thing to keep in mind as you're looking at this is the differences between this page and this page were accomplished solely with CSS. In other words, they have the same HTML. It's almost mind-boggling. Same content, totally different appearance. And that's important because companies like to change their image. Companies may rebrand themselves. Companies may merge with other companies, and there might be a need for you to change the whole site to reflect a different color scheme, to reflect a different appearance, and so on. That's why we put all our CSS code in that separate external CSS file, so that we have one place that we can go into and make the change, and the change is reflected everywhere on the site. Any questions about any of this? All right, next week, we will talk about our project. And no, it's not too early to start thinking about your project. End of semester comes quickly, right? Believe it or not. We're we're roughly a quarter of the way through the semester already, right? We're halfway to spring break. Those of you that are thinking in those terms, all right? So therefore, things happen fast. So it's not too early to start thinking about your project, but we'll go over more details about the project next time. So if there's no questions, we'll either see you in lab or we will see you next week.